My brother handed me a wrinkled $5 bill at my 42nd birthday dinner and told me to treat myself to something nice. Then he laughed. My sister-in-law laughed. Even my mother smiled into her napkin. Sometimes the most overlooked man in the room is the one quietly building the future everyone else is betting against. My name is Daniel. I'm 51 years old now, and I want to tell you something that took me nearly a decade to understand. Silence is not weakness. Patience is not failure, and the man everyone writes off is often the one holding all the cards. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in a small town in central Ohio, the second of three brothers. My older brother, Marcus, was the golden child, captain of the football team, scholarship to Ohio State, the kind of man who walked into every room and immediately became the center of it. My younger brother, Kevin, was the charming one. Sales jobs, fast cars, always a new story about a deal he'd almost closed. I was the quiet one, the one who read books on the weekends, the one who spent his 20s learning about commercial real estate, property law, and zoning regulations, while my brothers were out at bars celebrating their own brilliance. My father had left us a modest inheritance when he passed, about $80,000 split 3 ways. Marcus used his to put a down payment on a house in a suburb outside Columbus and throw a party to celebrate. Kevin used his on a boat he sold 8 months later. I used mine quietly. I put it into a deteriorating mixed-use building on the edge of a neighborhood that most people had already given up on. Nobody said anything nice about that decision. Daniel bought a condemned building, Marcus told everyone at Christmas that year, shaking his head like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. Classic Danny, always doing things the hard way. My mother worried. My sister-in-law, Renee, Marcus's wife, started calling me the project manager as a joke, meaning a man who managed failed projects. Kevin once told me, with genuine concern in his voice, that I should really think about what I was doing with my life. He had just gotten his third car repossessed. I didn't point that out. My wife, Sandra, was different back then. In those early years, she believed in me. Or at least she told me she did. We had met in our late 20s at a continuing education seminar on real estate investment, which should have meant she understood what I was building. She had dark hair and sharp eyes and a laugh that sounded like she found the whole world genuinely amusing. For a long time, I thought that laugh was directed warmly at the world. I eventually learned it was directed at me. We had 2 children together. Our son, Ethan, who was born when I was 33, and our daughter, Claire, who came 2 years later. I loved being their father more than anything I had ever done. I coached Ethan's Little League team. I drove Claire to every dance recital. I read to both of them every single night. And through all of it, I was also working. The building I had bought with my inheritance turned out to be in a neighborhood on the edge of a quiet transformation. Within 3 years, the city had rezoned 2 adjacent blocks for mixed commercial development. My building, which I had purchased for $68,000 and spent another $40,000 renovating, was suddenly worth 4 times that. I sold it. We invested the proceeds into 2 more properties and began what became a slow, disciplined, almost invisible accumulation. I say invisible because that is exactly what it was. I didn't talk about it. Sandra handled our household finances and I paid our bills generously. But I kept my business accounts entirely separate, not out of secrecy or deception. It was simply how I had structured things from the beginning, with a separate LLC, separate accounts, separate everything. Sandra knew I owned properties. She knew I was doing okay. She just didn't know the full shape of it because she never asked, and I never volunteered the whole picture. She was busy with her own career, a marketing director role at a regional healthcare company, and she had always seemed faintly bored by the details of my work. The birthday dinner where my brother handed me the $5 bill happened the spring after I had quietly closed on a portfolio acquisition that pushed my net worth past $4 million for the first time. Nobody at that table knew that. I sat with the crumpled bill in my hand, smiled politely, and said thank you. No, really, Danny, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair with the ease of a man who has never once doubted himself. When are you going to get a real office? When are you going to hire people? You've been doing this solo thing for 15 years. It's not going anywhere. He means well, Sandra said to me quietly on the drive home. But the way she said it, quickly, almost dismissively, told me she didn't entirely disagree with him. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not a dramatic shift. Not anger or outrage. Just a quiet recalibration. A decision made below the surface. I need to tell you about a man named Gerald Park. Gerald ran the largest private commercial real estate brokerage in our region. He was 62 years old, sharp as anyone I'd ever met, and he had a reputation for identifying undervalued industrial properties before anyone else saw their potential. I had done 3 deals with Gerald over the years, small ones from his perspective, significant ones from mine. He'd always treated me with a kind of distant professional respect, courteous, but not someone who invited you to dinner. About 8 months before that birthday dinner, Gerald had called me with something different. He was thinking about retiring. His firm, Park Commercial Group, had 12 agents, a strong client list, and a portfolio of managed properties that generated reliable fee income. He didn't want to sell to a large brokerage house. He'd had offers and turned them down. He wanted someone who understood the business the way he had built it. Someone patient, someone quiet. "You're the only person I know," he told me over coffee, "who has never once tried to impress me." We began preliminary conversations. Over the following months, I had his books reviewed by my accountant and a financial attorney I had worked with for years. The numbers were strong. Gerald wanted $8 million for the firm. I spent those months quietly restructuring my portfolio, arranging financing, doing the kind of careful, methodical preparation that would have put everyone at that birthday dinner table to sleep. I said nothing to Sandra. I said nothing to anyone. After the birthday dinner, I went home, put my children to bed, and sat in my home office until 2 in the morning, looking at the final term sheet. Then I signed it. What happened over the next several months is still difficult to think about clearly, because the business story and the personal story became tangled together in a way I hadn't anticipated. I had known for about a year that something was wrong in my marriage, not the dramatic, obvious wrongness of screaming arguments or cold silences. Something subtler. Sandra had started traveling more for work. She had started coming home later, some nights smelling of restaurant meals I hadn't been told about. She laughed at her phone in a way she hadn't laughed in years. She stopped asking about my properties. I didn't want to believe what I suspected. I am not a man who jumps to conclusions. I told myself I was reading the situation wrong. I told myself the distance between us was simply the natural erosion of a long marriage, the kind of thing that therapy could fix if we both committed to it. I suggested therapy twice. The first time, Sandra said she'd think about it. The second time, she said she'd think about it. The second time, she said she didn't think we needed it. The confirmation came on a Tuesday evening in November. I had come home early because Claire had a cold, and I wanted to be there when she woke up from her nap. I walked through the door to find Sandra on the back patio, speaking quietly into her phone. She didn't hear me come in. I'm not proud of what I did next. I stood inside the glass door and listened. She was talking to someone named David. I heard her laugh the way she used to laugh with me. I heard her say things that made the floor feel uncertain under my feet. I heard enough. I walked back to the front door, opened it loudly, called out that I was home, and listened to the way her voice changed. The laughter stopped. The warmth drained out. By the time she came inside, she was composed and pleasant and entirely the person I no longer recognized. I didn't say anything that night, or the next night, or for 3 weeks. Instead, I made a phone call to the attorney who had handled my LLC structure for years. I made another call to a forensic accountant. I made a third call to a private investigator, which felt like something from a television show and nothing like my actual life, but which turned out to be the most important call I made. What I learned over those weeks confirmed what I had heard on the patio and gave it a fuller shape. Sandra had been in a relationship with David for approximately 18 months. David was a regional vice president at a competing healthcare company. They had met at a conference. He was 44, recently divorced, and apparently very interested in my wife's future career opportunities. I also learned something else that turned out to matter enormously. Sandra had recently updated her personal financial disclosures for a senior leadership application at her company. In those disclosures, she had listed her assets in a way that suggested she was already anticipating a divorce, and anticipating that she would have a claim on my business holdings. My attorney read the disclosure documents and looked at me across his desk with the careful expression of someone delivering news he expects you to be upset about. "She's been talking to a divorce attorney," he said, "probably for several months." I sat with that for a long moment. "Okay," I said. "Okay, how do we make sure the park acquisition is clean?" That is when I found out that my years of keeping my business accounts entirely separate, structured under LLCs I had established before our marriage, with documentation that predated our relationship, had created a wall that Sandra's attorney was going to have a very difficult time climbing. Not impossible, but very difficult. And in my state, with the specific way I had structured the premarital documentation, my attorney believed we were in a strong position. I want to be honest about something. None of this felt like victory. Not then. Walking upstairs to check on Claire's cold that November night, sitting on the edge of her bed listening to her breathe, I felt something closer to grief than triumph. I had loved my wife. I had built things hoping she would one day fully understand what I was building. The fact that she has spent 18 months in someone else's arms while I was closing the most important deal of my professional life was not something I felt good about winning against. It was just something that had happened in my life. I filed first. Sandra came home on a Wednesday evening to find the papers on the kitchen counter. She picked them up, read the first page, and set them down, very carefully, the way you set something down when you're afraid of what your hands might do. "When did you do this?" she asked. "A few weeks ago," I said. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before, something between calculation and the first sign of real uncertainty. "We should talk about this," she said. "We should talk about everything." "We can talk through our attorneys," I said. The next several months were not easy. Sandra's attorney made aggressive claims about the Park Commercial Group acquisition. My attorney and the documentation held. Ethan was 14 by then, and Claire was 12. And I want to tell you that I handled every moment of those months with their faces in the front of my mind. I did not speak badly about their mother to them. I did not put them in the middle of anything. When they were with me, I made pancakes on Sunday mornings and helped with homework and drove to every school event I was able to reach. Marcus called me during the divorce proceedings with a tone I had never heard from him before. Something cautious, something reassessing. "I didn't know about the park thing," he said. "No," I agreed. "Danny," he said, and then paused for a long time. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I thought about that $5 bill. I thought about every Christmas dinner where my work had been described as a hobby. I thought about Renee's joke about the project manager. I thought about the quiet patience of years. "I was busy," I said. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday in April. I drove home, made dinner for myself, and sat at the kitchen table in a house that felt both emptier and more genuinely mine than it had in years. Ethan texted me from his mother's that evening to ask if I was okay. I told him I was fine and that I loved him. Claire called the next morning and asked if she could come over and make waffles. I said yes. I want to tell you about the moment that finally made the full weight of everything real to me. Because it wasn't the signing of any legal document or the closing of any business deal. It was a Saturday afternoon, about 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized. I was sitting in the backyard watching Ethan throw a baseball against the pitching net I had set up for him years ago. The light was doing something particular that afternoon. That warm late afternoon American light that makes ordinary yards look like something from a painting. Claire was reading on the porch steps. Nobody was talking. The three of us were just existing in the same space, which has always been my favorite kind of company. My phone buzzed. It was Gerald. He wanted to let me know that our first full quarter as a combined operation had come in 12% above projection. I set the phone face down on the arm of the lawn chair. Ethan wound up and through. Claire turned a page. The light moved through the yard. I had never felt less like a failure in my entire life. There is a version of this story that ends with confrontation. With me standing in some boardroom delivering lines I had rehearsed, watching someone's expression collapse. I understand why people want that version. I will be honest with you. There were moments when I wanted it too. There were nights in the middle of the divorce proceedings when I thought very specifically about what it would look like to walk into certain rooms and say certain things. But I have children who are watching how I handle the worst thing that has ever happened to me. I have a 15-year-old son who is taking notes on what a man does when his life falls apart and then comes back together. I have a 13-year-old daughter who is watching how her father treats the person who hurt him. Those two people are the most important audience I will ever have, so I chose something different than confrontation. I chose to simply become undeniably, visibly, permanently fine. Marcus visited in July. He sat at my kitchen table and looked around the house with new eyes. The kind of eyes that recalculate in real time. He asked about Park Commercial. He asked about the portfolio. He had the decency to look genuinely uncomfortable about the $5 bill, though he didn't mention it directly. "You really built something," he said. "I've been building it for a long time," I told him. He nodded slowly. I should have paid more attention. That was as close to an apology as Marcus was capable of, and I accepted it for what it was. Kevin called a month later asking about investment advice. I gave him the name of a financial advisor and wished him well. Sandra and I co-parent, with a distance that has gradually become something more like professional courtesy. She is with David, who I understand is now her fiancé. I wish them a life that fits what they want from it. I mean that sincerely. Anger is expensive, and I have better uses for my energy. What I want to tell you, if you stayed with me through all of this, is something simple. The world is full of people who will hand you a $5 bill and call it a birthday present. Full of people who will describe your patience as stagnation and your silence as defeat. Full of people who will decide what you are worth before you have finished becoming it. Those people are not your judges. They are simply not paying close enough attention. The day I officially took over Park Commercial Group, Gerald called me from his retirement home in Sarasota to congratulate me. He asked me what my plan was for the first year. The same plan as always, I said. What's that? Keep showing up. Keep building. Don't explain myself to anyone who isn't paying attention. He laughed. That's exactly right, he said. That's exactly how I built it, too. I hung up and walked into the office that now had my name on the door. 12 agents looked up at me. I said good morning. I sat down. I started working. That is all I have ever known how to do. And as it turns out, it has been enough. More than enough. It has been everything. If you're sitting somewhere tonight feeling like the quiet one, the overlooked one, the one everyone has already counted out, I want you to hear this from someone who has been exactly where you are. The people who underestimate you are doing you the greatest favor of your life. Let them. Keep building. The moment will come, and when it does, you won't need to say a word. Your silence will have already spoken for you. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. And if you want more stories about real people navigating real betrayal and finding their way through to something better, hit subscribe. I'll be here. I've thought a lot about why people underestimate the quiet ones. I think it's because stillness makes people uncomfortable. When someone isn't broadcasting their ambitions, isn't performing their progress, isn't asking for validation at every turn, it reads to most people as absence, as nothing happening. And when people see nothing happening, they fill that blank space with their own assumptions, usually unflattering ones. That's what happened to me for most of my adult life. And for a long time, I let it happen. Not because I was a pushover, but because I understood something that took me years to put into words. Your results don't need an audience to be real. The building I bought with my inheritance didn't care whether Marcus believed in it. The portfolio I built didn't require Kevin's approval to grow. The deal I closed with Gerald had been 15 years in the making. And not one person at that birthday dinner table knew it existed. And it's still closed. That's the first thing I'd want anyone to take from Daniel's story. Character is not what you perform for the people watching. It's what you do in the years when nobody's watching at all. Daniel didn't become who he became because someone believed in him. He became who he became because he kept showing up for himself, quietly and consistently, long after everyone else had decided the story was already written. The second thing is harder to talk about, but I think it's the more important one. Betrayal. Real betrayal. From someone you built a life with doesn't just hurt. It restructures your understanding of the past. You go back through years of moments and you see them differently. That laugh you thought was warm. That dismissal you told yourself was just tiredness. The distance you explained away. It all takes on a new shape. And the temptation, when that happens, is to let the anger from that restructured past drive every decision going forward. Daniel didn't do that, and I don't think it was because he was weak or indifferent. I think it was because he understood that the choices you make in your worst moments are the ones that define you longest. His children were watching. Not loudly, not consciously, but they were watching the way children always watch their parents during hard seasons, storing everything away for later. The man he chose to be in that period became the man his son will remember when he faces his own hardest season. That's a kind of legacy that no financial deal can replicate. What you put into the world, your honesty, your patience, the steadiness with which you face things that could reasonably break you, it does not disappear. It accumulates. It shapes the people around you in ways you'll never fully see. It comes back to you, not as some cosmic reward, but as the simple reality that people who build with integrity tend to end up with foundations that hold. And people who build on contempt and carelessness tend to end up standing on ground that shifts. Sandra made her choices. Marcus made his assumptions. The world gave each of them exactly the return on what they had invested. Daniel just kept building. That's all any of us can do. And as it turns out, for the people willing to be patient enough, it's more than enough.